I first drove the A-Class prototype a couple of years ago in Stuttgart, German engineers were calling it revolutionary. But then engineers have applied the revolutionary label to their products ever since the dawn of the motor industry. So let's look back through the history books at those cars that really have changed the face of motoring. Henry Ford's Model T, the first car to be built on a moving production line and bringing mobility to America's masses. The Volkswagen Beetle, air-cooled, flat-four engine, rear-mounted, independent suspension, unitary body again when chassis were all the rage, and flat-out motoring for the German masses on their new autobahns. And from Italy came the problem. How do you get Mama, Papa and their children into the smallest possible and the most economical package? The answer there, Fiat's inimitable 500. And finally, Alex Issigonis's marvel, the Mini, drawn literally on the back of a fag packet, with its transverse engine and gearbox in the sump. Now for me, a seminal car, and I think one of the best looking shapes of all time, is the Citroën Traction Avant. Just consider a monocoque body with no chassis, independent front suspension, torsion bars all round. It's low, fast, sleek, excellent steering and road holding. And that in 1934. That's what I call a landmark. Will the A-Class be in that league? Are we seeing the start of a design revolution where all engines disappear under the floorboards and all chassis become sandwich construction? Personally, I don't think so. Engineers will only adopt this sort of layout if they can afford to charge Mercedes prices. I don't think it'll be a failure, but like the old Hillman Imp, it'll be a car that engineers admire but don't imitate.
After the costly embarrassment of failing the notorious Elk test, does the new A-Class Mercedes-Benz finally go to the top of the class in terms of the more technical angles of engine design and safety? And in any case, what changes did they make to the original tipper truck version? Well, for a start, the whole car has been lowered slightly, 13mm at the front and 10mm at the back. It also has a wider rear track, and greater understeer has been built in as well. The shock absorbers were changed, and so too were the tyre specifications. But apart from those things, this is pretty much the original design. And let's not forget that where the A-Class is concerned, they pretty much started with a blank sheet of paper. And no doubt, after much scribbling and crossing out, the result has some incredibly ingenious design work incorporated. Let's go and have a look around. Cunningly, they've been able to make the interior space just 4mm shorter than the C-Class version from the back of the seats to the dashboard. But it's far more flexible. All these seats can be made to disappear. I'll come round and show you. Right, just 3 levers to play with here. Lever number 1, back flips over. Lever number 2, whole seat tilts up. Lever number 3 down here, and out comes the seat. Voila! Anyone for a minivan? The reason there is quite so much space is very clever, because down here, that's a false floor. Not the place to stash your family fortune though, because under there you'll find most of the engine and transmission. And since that's below, it frees up the space in front for the passenger cabin. Because you're perched on top of what amounts to a sandwich of 2 floors, with the engine and gear train in the middle, the ride position is quite high, which gives better visibility all round. Side protection is also improved because the driver and passengers sit above the normal side impact accident zone. But the big safety advantage comes in the inconvenient event of a head-to-head smash. Front-on collisions account for almost 2 out of 3 accidents. Today all cars have crumple zones designed into them to stop the engine penetrating into the passenger compartment. Nevertheless, a lot of injuries happen for precisely this reason. In the A-Class, not only is the engine and transmission housed partly in front and partly beneath the middle of the sandwich floor, they're also tilted at an angle, so that in the event of a crash, the whole lot slides downwards rather than straight back. The engines have also been specially designed for the A-Class, and there are 3 versions. 2 petrol, 1.4 litre and 1.6, which delivers 82 and 102 horsepower respectively. This is the 1.6 version. And there's also a 90 horsepower turbo diesel, which features something called direct injection common rail system. See what you think of this. Conventional high pressure injection systems have separate pipes feeding each cylinder. The Mercedes system uses a high-pressure pump that runs at a constant speed and supplies the fuel to the common rail pipe. This single pipe acts as a pressure accumulator and distributes the fuel to all the injectors, while the electronic engine management controls the injection pressure depending on the engine speed and load. Oh, and whilst we're at it, there's also an optional electronically controlled 5-speed automatic transmission, which happens to be the shortest and lightest of its kind anywhere in the world. So there. In fact, with the whole of the A-Class, Mercedes has pursued the concept of what they call intelligent lightweight design. It's based on the fact that a quarter of the weight of the car is made up of either aluminium, magnesium or plastic, which is 30% lighter than conventional steel construction. They've also used a stronger type of steel than usual in the body panels, so that they could be thinner and lighter. Now this is the 1.6 litre 5-speed manual with an added and rather surprising trick. You see, there's no clutch pedal. So when you want to change gear, you just lift your foot off the accelerator, the car senses that you want to change gear, and an electric motor operates the clutch for you. So you then just move the gear shift as normal. It's very strange at first, takes a bit of getting used to, but certainly saves your left foot, particularly in city centres. The A-Class is certainly a car of many letters. After all, it comes bristling with ABS, BAS, ASR and ESP, and you almost have to be psychic to work out what they all mean. First of all, ABS, well that's simple enough of course. It prevents the wheels from locking if you need to slam the brakes on in a hurry. BAS, brake assist system of course. If you make the brake pedal hit the metal in a hurry but not hard enough, the car does it for you. ASR, bit of a cheat this one, acceleration skid control. It prevents wheel spin during acceleration. All riders will be disappointed. And finally, ESP. No, not extrasensory perception, but electronic stability program, which incidentally was added to the car after things went topsy-turvy. Basically what it does is to take all the fun out of going round corners too quickly or swerving to avoid, say, well, an elk, by braking the car or slowing the engine down. And we find that it cuts in quite early, but it's very effective. All in all, this is a little technological tour de force. Mercedes-Benz have clearly turned somersaults to make sure that this is finally one of the safest cars on the road. Safe, that is, unless your chosen profession happens to be an A-Class crash test dummy.
This car I'm driving is unique, certainly unique as far as its manufacturer is concerned, which up until now had been the producer of largest luxury cars. Not to say that this car isn't luxurious. If David Beckham thought that he got a rough ride after his sending off in the World Cup, it was nothing compared to the hounding that this car received from the world's media after it was tripped up by the Swedes and fell over. And this is the all-new, all-revised Mercedes A-Class, which has finally arrived on our shores. The tripping up by the Swedes was, of course, the now infamous Elk test conducted by a group of motoring writers from a Swedish magazine. It involves a sudden and violent manoeuvre to avoid an object. What happened next is motoring folklore. The A-Class lost stability and over it went. Now, at that time, Mercedes hadn't started production of right-hand drive cars, so there were none in this country, but it led Mercedes to a complete halt of A-Class production until a solution was devised. And what they've come up with here is probably the safest small car, if not the safest car ever built. Mercedes spent £1 billion developing the radical A-Class, a Mercedes for the masses at a price that they can afford. And as you can see, there is nothing like it on the road today. It is so different. The Renault Megane Scenic is its closest rival in terms of its concept and what it stands for, but looks nothing like this. The real clever point about the A-Class is its size. It's actually less in length than a Ford car and over a foot less than a Ford Fiesta, and that is no mean feat. But inside it has the space and comfort of a large family saloon, and it has the boot space of a small to medium sized hatchback. Plus, all these passenger seats are removable, allowing you to have a very large load carrying area. Now, you could quite realistically compare the interior size of the A-Class with that of the C-Class and find very little difference. In fact, you'd have the impression of more space here in the A-Class because of the tall roofline and high seating position. There's a decent amount of space and legroom here in the rear, even for passengers like me, plus a very clever idea. I really like this, an integrated child seat. You press a button there, it pops back, locks into place, and what a neat idea that is. This model is the A160 Elegance, which is the most luxurious. Standard across the whole range are dual and side airbags, ABS, tinted glass, power steering, electric windows, and finally, a radio cassette. On the Elegance, you also get air conditioning, alloy wheels, and height-adjustable steering wheel. And as in most of the other Mercedes range, the choice of trim is classic, elegance, or avant-garde. There are 3 engines to choose from, a 1.4, 1.6 and 1.7 turbo diesel. This engine is the 1.6 and produces 102 brake horsepower from its 4-cylinder engine. 0 to 60 time takes 11 seconds and a top speed of 113 miles per hour with very good fuel economy. A figure of 39 to the gallon is quoted on the combined calculation, and the turbo diesel will give you 56 to the gallon. So, what about those other important safety features? Well, of course, there's ABS and brake assist, which works in emergency situations and helps the driver achieve maximum brake boost in a fraction of a second. ASR is a traction control system to stop wheel spin during acceleration. And finally, there's ESP, Electronic Stability Program, which unites all of the safety features, as well as reducing the risk of skidding and stabilising the car. It's ESP which was the critical addition to the A-Class, which has now made it so stable. The A-Class range comes, as you would expect, with a choice of 5-speed or automatic gearbox, plus what Mercedes describe as the best of both worlds, a 5-speed gearbox with an automatic clutch. What's that, you might think? You're confused, I can see. Well, so was I when the car first arrived at home the other day. I could see as I jumped in it was a 5-speed gearbox and went with my left foot to put on the clutch, only to find that there wasn't one. Took a bit of getting used to, I have to say. And now that you have mastered it, it's quite an easy gearbox to work with. You have to ease off the accelerator slightly, as you would do normally with a 5-speed gearbox and a clutch, to get smooth gear changes. And I quite like the idea of it. However, if you don't want the hassle of a clutch and a gearbox, I go for the automatic version anyway. Now, if you're used to driving largish 4x4 vehicles, you think that the A-Class will give you the same kind of superior safety feeling as those. Well, for me personally, it doesn't. At times, it can feel slightly nervous with a bit of body roll, but you at least know that with all the electronic safety assistance in the car, you'll be okay. Prices for the A-Class start at £14,490 on the road for the A140 Classic. The A160 starts at £15,490, and the most expensive A-Class is the 170 turbo diesel at £17,890. We decided to take the Mercedes A-Class to a private airstrip and really put it through its paces and see how those safety features have come over in the new car. First of all, we put it through a series of high-speed corners. Then a slalom test. There was a brake test from 70 miles per hour, which made the Mercedes stop very, very quickly indeed. And as you can see, there seem to be no problems. The electronic aids really come into play when you push it hard, especially coming out of a corner and putting your foot down hard on the accelerator. So we all really like the style and design of the Mercedes A-Class. It has some wonderful features and touches on it. Just look at that louvered sunroof, for instance. So is it a super mini, an MPV, a hatchback, or a quality executive saloon? Well, perhaps it's all of those things, and perhaps it's none of those things. It really is unique. There is nothing else like it. So who would this car appeal to? Well, certainly a young couple with a family who wanted that famous pointed badge for quality and reliability on their vehicle. My retired next door neighbour absolutely loved it, and after I'd taken him out for a spin in it, went scampering off to our local Mercedes dealer, who no doubt told him to join the 15,000 other people in the queue who apparently want a Mercedes A-Class. So it's a car that attracts people from all ages and all walks of life, and that's perhaps exactly what Mercedes intended the A-Class to be for.
Welcome to Roger Stansfield. I met Roger from What Car?
Hello.
Hello Roger, how are you doing? Are you alright?
Yeah, I think so, thanks.
Okay. Behind us the Mercedes A-Class, what do you think of it?
I think it's very good. It looks right. We've all seen sketches over the years gradually leading up towards this, but when they actually took the covers off it last night, I think everybody was impressed.
Yeah, it's not really the traditional Mercedes image though, is it? There's all these drivers that like their big flash Mercedes. What do you think they're going to make of it?
Mercedes are working very hard to try and make sure that they think it's good. But the traditional Mercedes image is actually changing. If you look at the SLK Roadster, the V-Class People Carrier, now this, some of the estates they're doing, and other coupes they're doing, Mercedes is no longer just big traditional family saloons. But you're right, they do have one PR job to do on this. They've got to reassure people who spend £100,000 on an S-Class that they're not watering down the Mercedes image by building this.
We heard from Roger Stansfield this is a very exciting story for Mercedes, and I'm joined by Doug Wallace from Mercedes UK. The idea of a small car in Mercedes, it just doesn't sort of quite seem to gel together. Why was this decision made?
Well, the market for the small car is a market that we should be in. We're growing in volume all the time. So although this is a small car, in every way, in every inch, it's a Mercedes.
Small car, definitely. What about small car pricing? What will this retail at, Doug?
Well, we still haven't got final prices yet, but I think you'll find that the car, in fact, in the UK will be very, very competitive.
How do you think that the drivers of your top-of-the-range luxury Mercedes are going to feel when they see these all over the roads? Are you taking away a little bit of the exclusivity that comes with having a Mercedes badge, do you think?
No, I don't think so, because we're always a premium car. We're a quality car manufacturer. Many people, for instance, who have S-Class cars will probably have this as a second car, or maybe their wife will have it. So no, that doesn't give us a problem at all. In fact, it's the opposite. We'll get more and more people onto the Mercedes ladder.
Yeah, you've got an incredible customer loyalty, haven't you, as a company anyway. Do you feel that this will happen? You'll get people buying this as a second car, maybe a car for children?
Very much so. We'll get younger people into buying this car, people who perhaps at the moment can't afford to get onto the Mercedes ladder. But yes, this will be their entry level, so it'll be very good.
Is there a sense of responsibility in a way with a company like Mercedes that are renowned for producing high quality executive vehicles to make sure that a cheaper car isn't cheaper, that it still has that level of class? And is it quite difficult to do?
It's been quite difficult on many ways to get this car from the concept to the design stage and then into production, but it has all the qualities of every other Mercedes you'll find on the road. It's a very, very safe car, which was one of the prime objectives, and also very, very spacious indeed, very flexible car. All of the seats, except for the driver's seat, for instance, can come out. So on the one hand, you have a small family car, and the next, if you want to travel with something quite bulky in the car, very quickly take the seats out, and there you've got luggage space.
From the inside of the A-Class, it's incredibly spacious. Is there actually storage space underneath the floor as well? Because I know there's space in between, isn't there?
That's right. Basically, you've got two floor pans with the car with a space in between, and in between there goes the exhaust pipe, the battery. Later on, if there's an electric version, the actual electric batteries will go between that space. So it makes very much sense because the driver is here, the passengers are here, there's no engine in front, it's underneath. All the rest of the gubbins of the car, if you like, are between the two floor pans.
I like that word, the gubbins. But does the gubbins being under there mean that it's maybe more expensive to service and to look after?
No, actually it's quite the contrary. It's actually easy to get to the top of the engine from the front of the car, and all the rest of the engine you can get access from underneath of the car. The side panels at the front are made of a special plastic and are bolted onto the car, so repair costs on the vehicle are actually quite reasonable.
Does that increase safety levels as well, with all the mechanics being away from the front of the vehicle?
Very much so. This was fundamental in the design of the car. Most small cars have the tendency that in an accident at the front, the engine gets pushed literally back into the driver. So with this car, with an accident, the engine goes underneath and away from the driver. So you're much, much safer in this car.
There's so much new technology on this vehicle and so much new development that I'm sure is incredibly expensive. How have you managed to do this, yet keep the price down and keep it affordable?
Well, of course, Mercedes does invest a lot in development and a lot in safety, so all that has come from that overall budget. And of course, we've learnt a lot from our other cars as well, and we've passed that information down onto the A-Class.